Good morning. I am Ginger Yoder, and I am your Director of Family Ministries. And Elizabeth is off this Sunday, and so I get to help guide you through this service. We also, I wanted to introduce Reverend Dr. Lynn Ungar, and she has served as a UU minister for over 30 years, including serving this church, Second Unitarian Church of Chicago, and many years with the Church of the Larger Fellowship, which is our online UU congregation. She has also published 3 books of poetry, and her poem Pandemic went viral in March of 2020. She received attention around the world with that particular one. And she lives in Vancouver, Washington with her 2 Australian shepherds. And Lynn is our guest minister today. And we're so lucky to have you. Some may have been here when Lynn served with us before, and some she may be new to. And you're in for a really special treat. We were really excited and lucky to have Lynn agree to be our guest minister today. So we begin our service by acknowledging that the land on which our homes and our church were built were not uninhabited when European settlers arrived here with their ideas of conquest and ownership. For those who live in Moscow, Pullman, or other nearby communities, we live on the ancestral homelands of the Nimipu, called the Nez Perce by the French-speaking traders, the Palouse, and the Shishunts, called the Coeur d'Alene. If you're joining us from another place, I encourage you to discover who inhabited or moved through the place where you are now in the times before colonization and genocide, and where they are now. We pause and remember that we live on ground that is sacred, ground that was stolen, ground that cries out for justice and for responsible stewardship. May our remembering help us find the courage to do our part to restore wholeness to the earth and all her peoples. And now let us join voices together for our words of welcome, unison chalice lighting, and sung affirmation. Whoever you are, wherever you've come from, whatever your beliefs, whomever you love, and however bumpy your life's journey, know that you are welcome here. We're hoping that everyone might have a chalice or a candle to light or something to light it with. And as I tell the kids who often come to our Zoom kids chats during the week, they never remember them, which is fine. I'm like, you can imagine a chalice, and that is just as good as having a real chalice. So let's light it together in real or in our imaginations.
Words. I'm Lena.
I'm Julia.
And I'm Lex. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek and seek to share.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung in every land by every tongue.
I'd like to welcome you into worship with the poem called On the Other Side. Through the looking glass, down the rabbit hole, into the wardrobe, and out into the enchanted forest where animals talk and danger lurks and nothing works quite the way it did before, you have fallen into a new story. It is possible that you are much bigger or smaller than you thought. It is possible to drown in the ocean of your own tears. It is possible that mysterious friends have armed you with magical weapons you don't yet understand, but which you will need to save your own life and the world. Everything here is foreign. Nothing quite. That's how it works. Do not confuse the beginning of the story with the end.
Ours be the poems of all tongues, all things of loveliness and worth, all arts, all ages, and all songs, one life, one beauty on the earth. Ours be the poems of all tongues, all things of loveliness and worth, all arts, all ages, and all songs, one life, one beauty on the earth.
I invite you to join in the spirit of meditation or prayer. You might want to close your eyes, take a deep breath, and come fully into this good moment, into this good company, into the presence of that which is within and beyond all of us. Our coming together forms the bowl of a chalice, and the flame inside that bowl lights us all, warms us all, holds us all. The poem says, joy and woe are woven fine and is always true. And so in the cup of our communal love, we hold the joy, the new possibilities, the new lives, the growth, the faint signs that spring is really on its way, metaphorically and literally. And we hold the losses, those who we are not able to see in person, those who we will never again be able to see in person. The memories that come back as painful, and the hope of what might yet be to come, and the joy of what we have been able to hold. All of it gathered here, all of it woven throughout our lives, all of it precious, precious, precious beyond words. And so, in gratitude and in love, we hold it all. Blessed be, and amen. The Mad Poet's Love Song. I live profligately, dispense big words for free, buy books for a single phrase, and then return like some odd fish again and again. I am promiscuous. I leave books in my bed, fall asleep clutching stories I've only just met. They wake me for my name. Mad women love this way, and thieves, giving everything for style, for the flash in the mind, the pull at the gut, risking everything, old loves, old views, for the day's perfect word, a phrase that caresses. Don't mock me. There is a strange fidelity in falling asleep to the chatter of the printed page and waking to the morning paper. No? Mouth with rhymes and spitting them slowly like watermelon seeds across the lawn. Then come back and tell me I'm wrong. It is so good to be with you. Just lovely to see familiar faces and new faces and across the distance, although somewhat less distance than when I was in California, to be with you. So thank you for having me here. 1 year ago this week, I posted a poem to my Facebook feed, which is something that I have been doing for years. Only this time the poem Pandemic went viral. People shared it not only on social media, but also in worship and neighborhood newsletters and hospitals and nursing homes. People from around the world shared their responses to it with me, and they translated it into their own languages to share with others. Now, I'm clear that the poem's popularity was not because I had written something uniquely marvelous, but rather because it served a purpose at a time that really called for that job. The job, I think, was thinking about how we might connect across distance, and it was a job that needed to be done. I believe that poetry is a thing that deeply matters, and it matters because it has a purpose. Now, I'm not sure when I started writing poetry, perhaps when I was around 10 or 11. I also have no idea why I started writing poetry. I suppose like the infamous mountain because it was there, if of course you can describe an unwritten poem as being there. Something wanted to be written, so I wrote it. My earliest attempts at theology were, I suppose, much the same. I do recall that when I was maybe in junior high school, coming home from a commencement ceremony for Star King School for the Ministry, our UU seminary in Berkeley that I would graduate from many years later, I wrote down a little thesis on the nature of good and evil. As I recall, all good was attributed to Santa Claus, while all evil was the handiwork of his alter ego, Anti-Claus. Now, by virtue of said seminary education, I can identify that theological standpoint as a kind of idiosyncratic Manichaeism. I could not, however, tell you either what inspired the thought or what drove me to actually write it down. For me, religion and poetry are just there, part of the underpinnings of life. I'm not sure that in my younger days I ever tried to define, let alone describe, why either one should matter, let alone what one might have to do with the other. But I could tell you that at some point in my life, I came to realize that every poem I wrote was, by some understanding, a religious poem. And that the impulse that pushed me toward ministry from my teens was not unrelated to the impulse that pushed me toward poetry from a bit younger. Which makes sense because when I really got down to thinking about it, I realized that religion and poetry are essentially the same thing. Or more precisely, religion and poetry do the same thing. Like a blender and a food processor, they might not look alike, but the function is the same. Blenders and food processors pulverize. And religion and poetry connect little things to big things. It's what they do. Religion and poetry connect little things to big things. Religion is about all the stuff that's too big to know in any absolute way. Love and death and evil and good and meaning and ultimate reality. Religion is about the things that are beyond words and the words that we use to approach those greater realities. What is the kingdom of heaven? Well, whatever it is, it's beyond definition. But in trying to answer the question, Jesus speaks of it in terms of the tiniest, most mundane things. It is like a mustard seed, quite literally the tiniest thing, which grows into a branching bush that the birds can nest in. It is like yeast, which a woman hides in flour, and the yeast leavens the whole 3 measures. We begin to know what we can't know by way of the ordinary things which we do know, right? Poetry does the same thing. It takes the most mundane, particular things around us and attaches them somehow to the things that our hearts know, but our minds might not be able to articulate. Let me offer you an example. A poem I wrote entitled Mozart and Manner. You don't expect to find such a thing on a common Chicago sidewalk, a mobile hump of tortoise casually navigating the cracked concrete. Of course, I know how the absurd breaks in, shuffling the deck of our expectations. God is, if anything, perversely creative, a practical joker of the first degree. But still, a tortoise is a tortoise, odd enough in its own reptilian context without wandering city streets in that determined tiptoe amble, pretending that one could just as easily be at home in this world anywhere at all, even the corner of Mozart and Manner. It's a tiny story, and for what it's worth, a true one. I was walking in the neighborhood where I lived many years ago in Chicago, and I saw a tortoise walking down the sidewalk. What makes it poetry, rather than just an oddity to mention at dinner, is the poem's temerity in suggesting that we might all just possibly be tortoises, awkward and out of place and entirely welcome and at home in this odd location called life. The little thing bumps up against the big one. But actually, metaphor, poetry does something a bit more extraordinary than bumping little things against big things. Metaphor claims that something actually is something else. As you may recall from some long ago English class, a simile asserts that something is like something else. My love is like a red, red rose. But the heart of poetry and the heart of religion is not simile, but metaphor. Something is not merely like another thing, it is that other thing. Now, you and I are certainly not tortoises, and yet the poem hints we are. Metaphor, poetry, religion insist that we are not merely similar to the things around, we are in some impossible way one and the same thing. One of the pleasures of a seminary education at Starr King School for the Ministry when I was a student there some 30 years ago was the opportunity to be in deep conversation with Bob Kimball, who was then the president of the school. There were some interesting challenges to those conversations, as it was notoriously difficult to make heads or tails of what Bob was saying. But the challenge I remember most particularly was that Bob refused to allow the use of the word about. You could say whatever you liked, you just couldn't use the word about. Religion, he said, dove into the heart of things, whereas the word about circled the edges. About, he claimed, was a distancing word, and so we did not talk about any subject. We engaged it or analyzed it or worried at it with our metaphorical teeth. Although it made for some awkward sentence construction at the time, I now understand what Bob meant. Religion is metaphor, not simile. We are not like the rest of the world. We are the rest of the world. Blenders and food processors pulverize, making multiple substances into one homogeneous mass. Poetry and religion leave the components intact, but layer them in such a way that each piece becomes translucent, whole and yet permeable, visible and yet allowing the other elements to show through. Like those pictures you might have seen of the systems of the human body printed on transparent film. We are our bones, but look, we're also our veins. See, we're our organs, but at the same time, we're also our nerves. The central truth of religion is the paradox of metaphor. It is absolutely true that each of us, human or tortoise, is a little thing, distinct and particular, with our own smooth or bumpy skin, our own deliberate or striding walk. We are individuals, each beautiful in our own particular way. That is the first principle of Unitarian Universalism, the inherent worth and dignity of every being. However, it is equally and paradoxically true that we are all one unified big thing. Call it spirit or life or the universe or God. Throughout time, mystics of all traditions have sung and danced and meditated and prayed and fasted in order to touch that elusive experience of unity with all creation, the sacred truth that we are all one. Rumi, the 12th century Sufi poet, says, "You're sitting here with us, but you're also out walking in a field at dawn. You are yourself the animal we hunt when you come with us on the hunt. You're in your body like a plant is solid in the ground, yet you're wind. You're the diver's clothes lying empty on the beach. You're the fish. In the ocean are many bright strands and many dark strands like veins that are seen when a wing is lifted up. Your hidden self is blood in those veins that are lute strings that make ocean music, not the sad edge of surf, but the sound of no shore. We are our particular selves, but we are also the unity of all that is, the ocean that has no shore. That is Unitarian Universalism's 7th principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence. We are the tiny things, the clothes on the beach, the fish in the sea. We are also inside and beyond any particular thing, awash in the great ocean of life. Metaphor is the only way that we can say these contradictory things and have them both be true. Here's how I put it in a poem entitled Boundaries. The universe does not revolve around you. The stars and planets spinning through the ballroom of space dance with one another quite outside of your small life. You cannot hold gravity or seasons, even air and water inevitably evade your grasp. Why not then let go? You could move through time like a shark through water, neither restless nor ceasing, absorbed in and absorbing the native element. Why pretend you can do otherwise? The world comes in at every pore, mixes in your blood before breath releases you into the world again. Did you think the fragile boundary of your skin could build a wall? Listen. Every atom is humming its particular pitch. Of course you are a symphony. Whose tune do you think the planets are singing as they dance? Your life is a tiny, insignificant thing. Your song is the song of the spheres. Of course, it isn't possible, it's just true. But religion is not just words, it is action. However, it's a particular kind of action in which we hold the pieces together, up to the light, so that the big things shine through the little things, and the little through the big. In a wedding ceremony, we hold the particulars of a relationship between two people up so that the grand concept of love can shine through. And in the wedding, we see love through the faces of those two individuals. When you take a moment to learn the name of a visitor to church, hospitality and welcome are held in your gaze, whether or not you are able to actually take hands. When you show up for a march or a vigil or a rally, what you do, walk down a street or chant or stand around, becomes a religious act because justice walks with you. In religion, in poetry, the big things as slip into one another become impossibly the same thing. The hymn puts it this way: the lone wild bird in lofty flight is still with thee, nor leaves thy sight. And I am thine, I rest in thee. Great Spirit, come and rest in me. Metaphors be with you. Blessed be, and amen.
The lone wild bird in lofty flight is still with thee, nor leaves thy sight. And I am thine, I rest in thee. Great Spirit, come and rest in me. The seas dark, deep, and far off land, and I am thine, I rest in thee. Great Spirit, come and rest in me.
this more or less anniversary of most of us going into a very different way of life during the pandemic, I wanted to close with this poem entitled Afterwards. Afterwards, she told her granddaughter the whole harrowing story, glossing over nothing. Not just the lives lost and the jobs, but also how it seemed like the world went dim when they lost dancing and singing, when the theaters and stadiums and concert halls closed down, when the school playgrounds went silent. We never forgot, she assured the girl, what a hug feels like. We never stopped wanting that. But Grandma, the girl asked, how did you do it? How did you make it through? It wasn't easy, the woman replied. But at some point we decided we were more attached to living than to our old ideas about the way things were supposed to be. Go in peace.
It is now time to extinguish our flame. We extinguish this chalice that it might grow gently in our hearts. May it light our paths as we leave this place. May it guide our way until we are together again. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Lynn.